There is a scene in cinema that defined the imagination of an entire generation. In Raiders of the Lost Ark, when the Nazis finally open the lid of the Ark of the Covenant in the middle of the island, they don't find gold, nor scrolls, nor dust. First, the lights begin to fail. A low hum fills the air. And then, suddenly, angels don't come out of the box. Energy does. Bolts of pure plasma tear through the soldiers, melting their faces and exploding their bodies, while the archaeologist Indiana Jones shuts his eyes and screams not to look. We watch this as pure Hollywood fantasy, special effects made to sell popcorn. But what most people don't know is that Steven Spielberg and George Lucas didn't invent that scene out of thin air. They based the visual effects on literal descriptions found in ancient Hebrew texts. The real Ark of the Covenant, the historical one, not the movie version, was in fact the most dangerous and volatile object in the ancient world. For millennia, religion has tried to soften this story. They told us the Ark was the throne of God, a symbol of a covenant, an object of love and devotion that united heaven and earth. But when you cast theology aside and open the Bible with the mindset of a forensic expert or a military engineer, what you find is disturbing. If God is spirit, omnipresent and immaterial, why would he require the construction of a physical box with measurements exact to the millimeter? If God is love, why did the Ark instantly kill any human being who touched it without gloves, including devout priests who only wanted to protect it? And strangest of all, why did a sacred object leave a trail of diseases identical to radiation poisoning wherever it passed? The answer that great researchers like Mauro Biglino, Erich von Däniken, and modern engineers are finding is frightening. Moses didn't come down from Mount Sinai with a religious symbol. He came down with a technological device, a machine capable of storing thousands of volts of static electricity, a high-power capacitor, a portable reactor, and, above all, an interstellar radio transmitter. The story of the Exodus is not the story of a pilgrimage of faith. It is the logbook of a military transport unit charged with moving the heavy equipment of a physical entity called Yahweh through a hostile desert. They carried a weapon on their backs. They died to protect it, and they had no idea what they were handling. Today, in this video, we are going to do something the church has forbidden for centuries. We are going to open the box. We are going to reverse engineer the construction instructions of Exodus. We will analyze the materials, the physics, and the autopsy reports of the Ark's victims. Get ready, because what we are about to discover completely changes our understanding of who or what was guiding humanity in the desert. This is not the story of a miracle. This is the story of the lost technology of the gods. Let's start our investigation at the place where it all began, the top of Mount Sinai. The traditional narrative tells us that Moses went up that mountain to receive moral commandments. Thou shalt not kill, thou shalt not steal. But if you open the Bible to the book of Exodus, chapter 25, you will realize that morality is merely a footnote. The vast majority of the time Moses spent up there wasn't spent listening to sermons. It was spent receiving engineering blueprints. Yahweh, the Elohim commanding that operation, hands Moses a technical project called terumah, and he is obsessive about the details. He doesn't say, "Build a house for me." He says, "Bring gold, silver, bronze, fine linen, goat hair, ram's skins dyed red, and acacia wood." Why would a spirit need such specific physical materials? Why would he need conductive metals and thermal insulators? The answer begins to appear when we look at the central object of this project, the ark. In verse 10, the order is given, "And they shall make an ark of shittim wood. 2 cubits and a half shall be the length thereof, and 1 cubit and a half the breadth thereof, and 1 cubit and a half the height thereof." Let's pause here and analyze the materials engineering. Why acacia? The desert has other plants, but acacia wood, known in Hebrew as shittim, has unique properties. It is extremely dense, rich in oils and tannins that make it resistant to insects, and crucially, resistant to moisture. In electrical engineering, if you want to build an insulator that doesn't rot and maintains its dielectric properties for centuries, acacia is the perfect choice available in the Bronze Age. It is the structural base of the machine. Now, look at verse 11. and thou shalt overlay it with pure gold. Within and without shalt thou overlay it. Here is the key to the mystery. Imagine the structure in cross-section. You have a gold box, metal truss conductor. Nested inside it, a wooden box, cellulose, trussed insulator. And nested inside the wood, another gold box, metal truss conductor. Anyone who has studied high school physics or electrical engineering in college recognizes this diagram immediately. This isn't a treasure chest. This is the literal definition of a capacitor. A capacitor or condenser is a passive component used to store energy in an electric field. It is made exactly like this: two conductors separated by an insulating material, the dielectric. The larger the surface of the conductor and the thinner the insulator, the greater the capacitance, the ability to hold a charge. Calculations made by engineers at the University of Minnesota, analyzing the cubic dimensions of the ark, approximately 1.10 x 0.7 cm x 0.70, suggest that if that gold were of high purity and the wood were dry, the ark would function as a parallel plate capacitor capable of accumulating thousands of volts. But accumulate energy from where? They didn't have outlets in the desert. They had something better: the environment. The Sinai Desert is an environment of extreme aridity. The relative humidity of the air is extremely low. This favors the accumulation of static electricity. Furthermore, the ark didn't stay still. It was carried. And covering the ark, according to Exodus 26, were curtains of fine twined linen, goat's hair, and ram's skins. Think of basic physics. What happens when you rub wool on amber or metal on a dry day? You generate static charge. The ark was a giant triboelectric battery. The movement of marching through the desert, the friction of the wool and skin coverings over the gold, the dry wind loaded with sand, all of this bombarded the outer box with electrons. This charge migrated to the inner box through induction or physical connections, turning the ark into a Leyden jar, the first type of high-voltage capacitor invented in Europe only in 1745. But Moses already had the blueprints 3,000 years earlier. And what was all this voltage for? The biblical text gives us the clue in the design of the lid, the kaporet or mercy seat. Verse 18, "And thou shalt make 2 cherubims of gold, of beaten work shalt thou make them in the 2 ends of the mercy seat." They were to have their wings spread out above, covering the lid, and their faces turned toward one another. In high-voltage engineering, points and edges are dangerous because they concentrate the electric field. It's called the point effect or corona discharge. By placing 2 gold conductors, the cherubim, with the tips of their wings very close to one another, you create a spark gap. If the voltage in the box rose too high, say, on a day with a sandstorm or excessive transport, the energy needed a place to escape before the wood burned. The discharge would jump from one wing to the other, an electric arc, a blue lightning bolt crackling between the angels. For a Bronze Age Bedouin, seeing a blue lightning bolt coming out of a gold box in the dark of the tabernacle would be visual proof of the presence of God. But for us today, it is proof of a functional electrical circuit. Yahweh didn't hand Moses an object of faith. He handed him a power generator and storage unit. And like any high-voltage equipment, it came without a safety lock for those who didn't know how to operate it. Now that we understand the ark was a giant capacitor charged with electrostatic energy, the inevitable question arises: how did they transport it without dying every day? Imagine placing a high-voltage battery in the middle of a tribe of Bronze Age nomads. Children running, animals, curious onlookers. Disaster would be certain. This is where the tribe of Levi comes in. Religious tradition taught us that the Levites were the spiritual chosen ones. But when we analyze the organizational structure of the camp in Numbers, they don't look like priests. They look like a security and technical maintenance team. Yahweh establishes a strict exclusion zone. The Hebrew term used to describe the status of the ark and the Levites is kadosh. We translate this as holy. We say God is holy and the ark is holy. But the Semitic root of kadosh, QDSH, has nothing to do with moral goodness or purity of heart. The literal meaning is separated, cut off, different, or reserved. Or, the ark wasn't holy because it was kind. It was kadosh because it was dangerous and needed to remain isolated, and the Levites were the only ones authorized to enter the kadosh zone. Why? Because they had the training and, crucially, the equipment. Let's analyze the high priest's uniform described in Exodus 28. Once again, forget the liturgical view of pretty clothes for Mass. Look at it like an engineer. The text says the ephod, the vest, had to be made of gold, blue, purple, scarlet, and fine twined linen. Verse 3 of Exodus 39 details how they did this. And they did beat the gold into thin plates and cut it into wires to work it in the blue and in the purple, and in the scarlet and in the fine linen. Think about that. They were weaving gold threads, a conductive metal, into the weave of the linen fabric. If you cover a person's entire body with a conductive metal mesh, you create what physics calls a Faraday cage. If an electrical discharge hits that person, the electricity runs through the outer mesh, around the body, and goes to the ground without frying the internal organs. The priestly garments had the characteristics of an arc flash protection suit. And there was another crucial safety detail, the audible warning. In Exodus 28:33-35, Yahweh orders pomegranates and gold bells to be sewn onto the hem of the priest's robe. The text is explicit about the reason. And his sound shall be heard when he goeth in unto the holy place before the Lord, and when he cometh out, that he die not. This is a basic industrial safety protocol. Don't surprise the machine. If the priest entered silently into the electrostatic field of the ark or the tabernacle, he could cause a sudden dielectric breakdown. The bells warned of his presence. They allowed the entity or the operators inside to know someone was approaching. But what happened when the protocol was broken? To see this in practice, we need to jump forward in time. Let's go to the book of 2 Samuel chapter 6, the Uzzah incident. Centuries after Moses, King David decides to transport the ark to Jerusalem, but they make a gross error. They ignore the manual. The original instruction was clear. The ark must only be carried on the shoulders, suspended by the acacia wood poles that pass through the side rings. The wood isolated the electrical charge from the bodies of the carriers. But David and his men put the ark on a new cart, a wooden structure with wheels pulled by oxen. The terrain was uneven. The ark began to sway. The vibration and friction increased the static charge accumulated on the gold plates. The machine was at peak voltage. Arriving at the threshing floor of Nachon, the oxen stumbled. The ark tilted and threatened to fall to the ground. Uzzah, one of the drivers walking alongside, acted on reflex, a human, noble, and protective reflex. He reached out his hand to hold the throne of God. Verse 7 says, "And the anger of the Lord was kindled against Uzzah, and God smote him there for his error, and there he died by the ark of God." Theology has tried to explain this for millennia. Uzzah had sin in his heart. Uzzah wasn't worthy. God is sovereign and kills whom he wants. But this explanation turns God into a temperamental monster who kills a faithful servant just for trying to help. Physics offers a much more logical explanation consistent with the nature of the object. Uzzah was walking on the dirt ground. He was grounded, earth wire. The ark was on the cart, isolated from the ground by the wood, charged with thousands of volts. The moment Uzzah's hand touched the metal of the ark, he closed the circuit. The electricity didn't choose to kill him. The electricity felt no wrath. The electricity simply obeyed Ohm's law. The current flowed from the area of highest potential, the ark, to the area of lowest potential, the ground, passing through the path of least resistance, Uzzah's body. He suffered a fulminant cardiac arrest caused by high-voltage electric shock. King David, in fact, did not react with adoration. The text says David was displeased and afraid of the Lord that day. He didn't understand why his deity was so volatile. He ordered everything to stop and left the ark at the house of a man named Obed-Edom. He didn't want that thing near him. David realized what many modern scholars are realizing now. That wasn't an idol. It was an unstable power plant, and they had just lost a technician due to a lack of PPE. So far, we have established that the ark could kill via electrocution. But the story gets much stranger and more disturbing when we read 1 Samuel chapters 5 and 6. The context is war. Israel faces the Philistines and loses. In a desperate attempt to turn the tide, the Israelites take the ark to the battlefield, treating it like a magic talisman. It doesn't work. The Philistines massacre the army of Israel and capture the ark. They take the trophy to the city of Ashdod and place it inside the temple of their god Dagon. Here begins the biological nightmare. The next morning, the priests of Dagon enter the temple and find the statue of their god fallen on its face before the ark. They lift it up. The next day, the statue is fallen again, but this time, the head and hands have been cut off and lie on the threshold. Only the torso remained. Theologically, this is interpreted as the supremacy of Yahweh, but physically, low-frequency vibrations or intense magnetic fields can destabilize stone structures, breaking them at their weakest points, neck and wrists. It is as if the ark were emitting a constant destructive frequency. But what happened to the people of the city was far worse. Verse 6 says, "But the hand of the Lord was heavy upon them of Ashdod, and he destroyed them and smote them with emerods." Let's stop at the word emerods, or tumors. In the original Hebrew, the word used is ophel, or tekorim in later Masoretic texts. For centuries, Puritan biblical translators, embarrassed by the text, translated this as hemorrhoids. But the clinical description doesn't match hemorrhoids. The text speaks of swellings, protuberances on the skin, and hidden sores. It speaks of a deadly destruction and people dying in agony. Erich von Däniken and nuclear physicists who have analyzed the text point to a terrifying conclusion. These are symptoms of acute radiation syndrome. When a nuclear reactor loses its shielding or radioactive waste is exposed, ionizing radiation attacks the body's cells. The first symptoms are nausea and skin swelling, radiation burns. Then, the immune system collapses. Hair loss occurs, wounds do not heal, and rapid cancerous tumors develop. The Philistines of Ashdod panicked. They realized that the presence of the object was causing the disease. What did they do? What anyone would do with toxic waste. They sent it to their neighbor. They shipped the ark to the city of Gath. As soon as the ark arrived in Gath, the text says, "There was a very great destruction, and he smote the men of the city, both small and great, and they had emerods in their secret parts." Notice the pattern. The disease isn't a magic curse that strikes enemies instantly across the whole country. The disease travels with the box. It is a local contagion based on physical proximity. The people of Gath, terrified, shipped the ark to Ekron. And when the ark arrives at the gates of Ekron, the population takes to the streets screaming, "They have brought about the ark of the God of Israel to us, to slay us and our people." They didn't view it as a god. They viewed it as a biological weapon. The text describes a deadly destruction throughout the city. After 7 months of devastation, the Philistine priests and diviners, who in practice acted as the scientists of the time, made a pragmatic decision. Return this thing and send it away with a trespass offering. The offering they made is the final proof of the nature of the disease. They molded 5 golden tumors and 5 golden mice. Why mice? In cases of environmental radioactive poisoning, small animals, which live in burrows in the ground where heavy radiation accumulates, are the first to die and appear in droves on the surface or flee contaminated areas by invading homes. The plague of mice may have been a side effect of soil contamination. They put the ark on a cart without a driver, no one wanted to get close, and let the oxen take it back to the border of Israel, to a field in Beth Shemesh. And here occurs the most revealing incident of all. The Israelites of Beth Shemesh see the ark arriving and rejoice. They run to see the object. 1 Samuel 6:19 recounts the disaster. "And he smote the men of Beth Shemesh, because they had looked into the ark of the Lord, even he smote of the people 50,000 and 70 men." Some modern translations say 70 men, others maintain the 50,000. But the number matters less than the cause. They looked into the ark. If the ark was a container for radioactive material, perhaps the power source for the so-called kavod, and the lid, the mercy seat, was removed or displaced, those men looked directly into the unshielded reactor core. It wasn't a moral punishment. It was direct exposure to gamma rays or neutron radiation. The reaction of the survivors of Beth Shemesh was exactly the same as the Philistines. They said, Who is able to stand before this holy Lord God? And immediately asked for the ark to be taken away from there to Kiriath Jearim. Nobody wanted the ark. Friends or enemies, Hebrews or Philistines, everyone learned the lesson the hard way. That box does not forgive. It kills. Given everything we have seen, the lethal electricity, the radiation causing tumors, the need for protective clothing, the million-dollar question arises: why carry this burden? Why drag a half-ton box, counting the solid gold of the mercy seat, through the desert for 40 years if it killed its own carriers and required extreme care? No army carries dead weight. No general keeps equipment that costs more lives than it saves, unless that equipment is vital to the mission. The Ark of the Covenant was not an object of worship. It was a survival tool. The primary function of the Ark is explicitly described in the Operation Manual in Exodus 25, verse 22. Yahweh says to Moses, "And there I will meet with thee, and I will commune with thee from above the mercy seat, from between the two cherubims which are upon the ark of the testimony, of all things which I will give thee in commandment unto the children of Israel." Read this with forensic attention. God doesn't say, "I will speak to you in your heart." He doesn't say, "I will speak to you in dreams." He gives a precise spatial coordinate, a geolocation down to the centimeter. The voice would come exactly from the empty space between the two metal wings. This changes everything. This transforms the ark from a symbolic throne to a radio transceiver. In radio physics, to transmit and receive electromagnetic waves, you need energy, the capacitor or battery we analyzed in Block 1, and an antenna, the gold cherubim. The space between the cherubim functioned as a spark gap or a focal point of resonance. The oldest Jewish mystical texts, such as the Zohar and oral traditions preserved in Kabbalah, describe the ark's behavior in a very mechanical way. They say that when communication was about to happen, the ark hummed, it vibrated. Sometimes the object would lift slightly off the ground, as if under the effect of anti-gravity or intense magnetism, and sparks would fly from above it. This is the description of a machine powering up, the system boot. Remember the larger context. The Israelites were following what the Bible calls the cloud by day and the pillar of fire by night. Mauro Biglino and Zechariah Sitchin argue that these terms describe the aerial vehicle, the ship, or the kavod of Yahweh. The ark was the ground terminal. The kavod, ship, was up high, or landed on top of the mountain shrouded in smoke, camouflage. Moses was down below with the ark. To receive tactical orders, turn left, set up camp, attack that city, they needed a secure and direct channel. The ark was that channel. But the communication technology didn't stop at the big box. There were portable peripherals. The high priest carried on his breastplate, inside a fold of the fabric, two mysterious objects called Urim and Thummim. The Bible never explains what they are, because for the reader of the time it must have been obvious. But the translation of the names gives a clue. Urim means lights, Thummim means perfections, or completeness. Whenever the king or general needed a quick decision and couldn't set up the entire tabernacle, they called the priest and asked a binary question: should we pursue the Philistines? Yes or no? The biblical text says the priest consulted the Urim and Thummim, and Yahweh answered. But how? Did a voice speak? The Jewish historian Flavius Josephus, who lived in the 1st century and had access to temple records before they were destroyed by the Romans, wrote something fascinating in his Antiquities of the Jews. He said the stones on the priest's breastplate sparkled or shone with a supernatural light to indicate an affirmative answer. If the stones remained unlit, the answer was no or no signal. This isn't magic. This is a display. Imagine a liquid crystal or fiber optic device powered by induction when close to the ark, the battery, or possessing its own power source. Light on, Ha1, yes. Light off, Ha0, no. It is a binary digital communication system. This explains why in certain passages, like in 1 Samuel 14:37, Saul asks God, but he answered him not that day. The religious text says God was silent because he was angry. The technological reading says the transmitter was out of range, out of battery, or experiencing interference. The Urim didn't light up. The system was offline. When we look at the whole set, the capacitated box, the cherubim antenna, the headset of glowing stones, the image that emerges is not one of a religious cult. It is the image of a field military operation. The Israelites were the ground infantry, Yahweh was air support, and the Ark was the field radio that kept the two connected. They protected that radio with their lives, not because they loved the box, but because without it, they would be deaf, blind, and alone in the middle of a hostile desert. We reach the end of our investigation with the question that has haunted historians and treasure hunters for 2,500 years. Where is the Ark of the Covenant today? If it were just a symbolic wooden box, its fate wouldn't matter much. But if we have proven that it is a technological device, a high-voltage capacitor, and a radioactive source, then its whereabouts is a matter of global security. The trail of the Ark goes mysteriously cold in the Bible. When King Nebuchadnezzar II of Babylon invades Jerusalem in 587 BC, he burns Solomon's temple. Babylonian and biblical records meticulously list the loot: the bronze pillars, the basins, the shovels, the forks. But the Ark is not on the list. It wasn't taken to Babylon, it vanished before the invasion. There are legends that the prophet Jeremiah hid it in a cave on Mount Nebo. There are theories that it is buried under the Dome of the Rock, in tunnels the Knights Templar excavated centuries later. But the most tangible evidence points south, to Africa. In the city of Aksum, Ethiopia, there is a small stone chapel surrounded by fences, known as the Chapel of the Tablet, in the complex of the Church of Our Lady Mary of Zion. The Ethiopian Orthodox Church claims, without a shadow of a doubt, that it possesses the original Ark of the Covenant. According to their tradition, described in the book Kebra Nagast, the Ark was taken from Jerusalem by Menelik I, the son of King Solomon and the Queen of Sheba. Thousands of Ethiopian Christians believe this, but what catches the researchers' attention isn't their faith, it is the behavior of the guardians. The Ark is watched by a single man, a virgin monk, chosen for the position of guardian of the Ark. Once appointed, he can never leave the chapel area again. He lives and dies there, a few meters from the object. No one else can see it. No one else can enter. British historian Graham Hancock, in his book The Sign and the Seal, investigated this tradition deeply and discovered a disturbing medical pattern. The guardians of the Ark tend to have a short life expectancy after assuming the position. And curiously, most of them develop cataracts in their eyes very quickly, going blind shortly after starting the service. Let's connect the dots with the science we discussed at the beginning. Cataracts are a clouding of the eye's lens. One of the known causes for the accelerated development of cataracts in healthy people is chronic exposure to ionizing radiation or intense ultraviolet light. If the machine is still inside, if the radioactive core that caused the tumors in the Philistines is still active, even if weak, after 3,000 years, then the guardian is sacrificing his own life, dying slowly of radiation poisoning, to protect the world from what is inside that box. The story of the Ark of the Covenant is not a religious fairy tale. It is the account of an infant humanity trying desperately to deal with technology it did not understand. We look at a reactor and call it glory. We look at electrocution and call it wrath. We look at radiation and call it plague. The Ark is physical proof that we are not alone and that our contact with them was not spiritual. It was material. It was technical. It was dangerous. Maybe it is better that it remains lost in Ethiopia or buried in a dark hole. Because if one day we find the Ark, and if by chance the battery still holds a charge, the first thing we will discover isn't the face of God. We will discover that the phone is still ringing, and someone is going to have to answer it. Thanks for watching the video. If you liked it, please leave a like and subscribe to the channel to support us and become a member to get exclusive access to the audio versions of our material. This helps us a lot. Don't forget to turn on notifications so you don't miss any content. See you next time.